All right. Okay. Um, well, I think it's always useful to set context, both for you to get to know me, as well as for me to get to know all of you. Um, I have been given to understand that a big part of why you are here is interest uh in being a instrumental part in strengthening relationships between Pakistan and China. Has anyone in the audience been to China? Not yet.
Oh,
I'm guessing those online as well. Not yet.
We can hear you. You can hear us as well, right?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
yes, I don't think so, Aloysius. There's a no everywhere.
Yeah, it's a resounding no.
That's great because then you wouldn't know whether what I'm telling you is true or not. Okay. So like I said, it's important for me to know the audience so that I know what to share, right? In any case, I just came back from China, and that's the truth. I can show you pictures on my phone to prove all of that. I just came back from China from a family holiday in December. We went to the Shanghai Disneyland. I've got three kids. So that's what it is. Um, and I was also just before that, my most recent business trip was also to China. That's how my wife likes to torture me. Uh, and I was talking to some of the people there. So suffice to say that I think one of the if you have not been there, and this is particularly true for someone from Singapore, but I think it's true for people from Pakistan as well. The Chinese will always remind me, please stop thinking of us as one country. Um, right? And I know this is recorded and I dare to say it up front, just because they are communists doesn't mean that everyone is the same. Okay? And the fact is that when I was there, and I've been there many, many times, Beijing alone, uh, they like to remind me, Beijing alone is about 50 times the size of Singapore, right? And so is Shanghai. Shanghai is another huge tier one city. I was there in Hangzhou, which for the longest time was only a tier two city, and even Hangzhou is about 10 times the size of Singapore, both in terms of physical size and in terms of population. And definitely in terms of GDP. China is a huge amalgamation of different cities, very, very bustling, very different. To compare it, it's a lot like what my friends in Pakistan have said. And I don't mean to cause offense. I've not been to Pakistan yet, but I've met people from different parts of Pakistan online, and I will be in Pakistan in April, definitely.
Yeah.
But with CIICA, right? But it is a bit to treat China as a one country is it's kind of similar to saying people from Islamabad and Karachi and Lahore are all identical.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, I'm from what I've gathered, each of these cities and the other cities are extremely different. With that as a context, I did prepare some slides and again, I'm not very sure what is the familiarity across the board for all of you. I know many of you are listening to me as part of the competition preparations. As I shared with my hosts who have invited me to speak, I I'm here to give you a very practical perspective on mediation practice. I'm not here to make you mediation ready. I want to speak as an international mediator, someone who has been practicing, someone who has been helping people to set up mediation centers, and share with you my views on what will work, not my views what will help you to win a mediation competition. So please take this input with that pinch of salt. What is mediation, right? Again, I think we have many, many different definitions. And I think as much as I practice this now, and I've been practicing this for 20 years, the discovery that I've had as I encounter more and more mediators outside of Singapore, and as I travel and learn from other jurisdictions, is that at its heart, where mediation has a common root, regardless of which jurisdiction the mediator comes from, is that there is this huge focus on collaborative problem solving. And there is a belief that collaborative problem solving works best when the mediator can help create a good atmosphere of confidence. And when I say confidence, I mean, I refer to confidentiality. It should be a place where people can trust that what is being said will not be leaked outside of the room without their consent. And with that creation of that atmosphere of confidence, part of the mediator's training is not just to create the atmosphere of confidence, but to deal with what happens once you've created that atmosphere of confidence, which is a lot of direct, candid conversation. Because once you've created this space, and I just had a matrimonial case on Saturday, you must be prepared that people are going to get angry, they're going to say angry things, and they are going to cry because now they trust you, and they feel like they are in a space where they can show how they feel and speak about what they care about. The second element of collaborative problem solving and of mediation is that I think people do come, as much as they want to get what is closest to their heart. They want justice. Let's not pretend that justice is irrelevant in mediation. Every party who comes for mediation wants a certain sense of justice, and being able to achieve that justice is what gets them to settle, what gives them the sense of closure, to sign off. But part of the mediator's skill then is to help them to realize that just because I can help you to feel like you won does not mean that I need to make the other side feel like they lost. So this is the other very big part of what mediators do. How do we get both sides to the point where they can recognize that, yeah, I might not have fully won, I also didn't fully lose. Right? And it's a difficult mindset change that we are trying to create, but across jurisdictions, mediators recognize this. Clients who come for mediation also recognize that, look, this is not a process where somebody is going to declare me the all-out winner. The third part of mediation that is fairly common is that because, like it or not, the mediated outcome, if successful, is primarily a contract. And we'll talk more about this later on. Because I know there are new mechanisms beyond just a contract for enforcing a settlement agreement. But in the very least, if you settle it, it will be a contract. And for a contract to hold, I always remind mediators, what makes a contract hold is not fear of a court sanction. What makes a contract hold and not breached is the fact that one side trusts the other side to perform their obligation, because it is good for them to see it performed. So part of that work of the mediator is to create at least a very basic level of trust. And that trust comes from having enough checks in the mediated settlement agreement. And part of our work, therefore, is it's not just an empty, touchy-feely kind of trust. It's a trust like our legal training teaches us to foster, right? There are safeguards. Trust comes from having clarity of obligations, and we therefore need to be very clear in helping parties feel like this is a process and a settlement agreement that is going to hold. And yes, then part of this changing landscape internationally is that there are now a lot of multilateral instruments, international instruments, like the UN Convention on Mediation, that can ensure that the outcome is valid, that it is strong, it gives parties confidence that this is the end, right? And again, one of the myths of the critics of mediation has been that mediated outcomes are non-enforceable, that they are toothless. I think a big part of real collaborative problem solving is that our outcomes tend to hold much more than court orders. Again, that you guys have a competition coming up, I'm assuming that you already know what a mediation is. In Singapore, what we have is a Mediation Act. I don't think Pakistan has your legislation in place yet, because I know you have just signed the Singapore Convention. So from what I gather, we are still putting in place your Mediation Act. I might be wrong, right? But Singapore does have our Mediation Act. And essentially, how we have defined it is that there are independents. It can be one or it can be more than one mediator, helping parties to resolve a dispute by clarifying what is it you're unhappy about, what are the actual issues, to help them find solutions, to generate options, improve their communications with one another, and to ensure that this is something which, if they sign off on, they sign off wide-eyed, right? The interesting part is Singapore was fairly careful in wording the voluntariness as reaching agreement. I think we knew that we would do what we currently have done. This is 2017, right? So we're now in 2024. Sometime last year, Singapore has started mandating mediations. So you might not be voluntarily starting a mediation, but once the mediation starts, at least if you reach a settlement agreement, that should be voluntary. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but suffice for everyone to know that, at least in Singapore, who is a mediator under the Mediation Act is that you must be properly trained and certified. And what does properly trained and certified mean? It means that you are trained by a recognized mediation training provider, and you are then certified by a recognized standard body, which in Singapore is the Singapore International Mediation Institute, right? So you cannot self-declare yourself as a mediator and expect that what you mediate and settle can be converted into a court order. So that is the power of our Singapore Mediation Act, right? The power of our Singapore Mediation Act is that when you mediate the matter, what you mediate will hold as a court order if parties apply for it to be converted into a court order. What this has meant for professional mediation practice and international mediation practice, and I think for all of you who are here, again, you will know this, the increasing legitimacy of mediation as a form of dispute resolution has meant that today, commercial mediation involves actually three very big phases. I think historically, a lot of people are obsessed with the middle phase, the gray phase, right? Where people for the actual day that people sit down to come for the mediation. But for those of us who are mediation professionals, if you speak to any international mediator worth his weight in salt, they will tell you actually a big part of our work as mediators or as mediation advocates, lawyers who prepare clients for mediation, is in the blue segment. The preparation work is valuable, and I can tell you that many of us charge for the preparation work, right? Because it's intense. Increasingly, post-mediation plays a part as well. And post-mediation plays a part because, like in Singapore, where mediation is increasingly the norm, it's not fully the norm yet, but because we are increasingly mandating it and clients are becoming familiar with it, they do ask for mediations. What happens is that when people are forced to come for mediation, and when mediation is increasingly popular at an early stage, more mediations are not settled on day one. And let me say this transparently, right? More mediations are not settled on day one, but it does not mean that the mediation has failed. It means that the mediator and the lawyers need to plan for round two. We need to follow up with our clients and say, what did we learn from the first round? How do we build towards a round two? Right? So increasingly, there is this post-mediation element that is becoming a part of our work. If there's any confusion and questions and comments so far, feel free to holler, okay? Right? So interrupt me whenever you want. And this includes the online audience.
Yeah, I think we're good. If you have any questions, you can hear us. So you guys can raise your hand.
Very good. Where again, I think there is consistency across the board is the mediation process. So let's focus on a bit on the gray as well as the blue. In terms of pre-mediation, the skill that is a big part of the mediation that distinguishes the mediation professional. One is, we call it case statements, but it's the summary of the client's case that is prepared for submission to the mediator and often for exchange with the other side. It's the written summary. It's the written summary at the international level will sometimes also include a very filtered selection of documentary evidence, right? So you don't give the same boxes fulls of documentary evidence that you might give to a court, but you filter through a few key documents that you think is useful for the mediator to get a better sense of where your client is coming from. And usually the case statements that I get, as a rule, I would tell parties, please keep it to about 10 to 20 pages. And then the annexures, I would also tell them 3 or 4 is much more than enough. Right? And this, when the lawyers prepare this for me, and when I read it, a lot of mediators are too lazy to read the statements that are submitted by lawyers, right? But we should read it. We should then think through what is our mediation strategy. How do we manage the parties? Where are the information gaps? I go so far as to try to think through beyond what they say they want, what else could they be really interested in? Because again, you can well imagine, number one, clients don't tell lawyers everything. Number two, lawyers also don't tell the mediators everything, right? So I'm always reading it and I'm trying to guess what is it that is being hidden from me. And oftentimes, what I found useful is to do what I call a pre-mediation, which is where I call up the lawyers separately, but I make it known to them that I'm going to do this so that it's fair and it's transparent. Look, I'm going to talk to the lawyers for about 15 to 30 minutes each, about 2-3 days before the mediation. I just want to discuss how we best approach the case because we only have 1 day, maybe 2 days for an international case. I want to know how I can use the time efficiently. So that's what I do during the pre-mediations. And then we come to the mediation day itself. And
Aloysius, Darab here from CIICA. I have a small question here.
yes.
So, during the pre-mediation process, to what extent, if at all, a mediator should conduct their own investigation or inquiry going beyond the material provided to the mediator by the parties? Should a mediator be doing that at all? Should the mediator be taking on that onus? Or the mediator should strictly stick to the documents and the evidence provided or the case statements provided by the parties?
Thank you. Excellent question. I think the textbook answer is don't cross-examine your lawyers, right? Yeah. But that said, I think because the pre-mediations are conducted privately with the counsel separately, right? So the other counsel is not in the room. I will use this opportunity to clarify information gaps. I give you an example, right? I had a loan dispute. It looked very straightforward. Husband and wife borrowed money from friends, and then refused to repay. Right? And then the friend sued the husband for the money. And the loan was for the renovations of the matrimonial home. And so when I received the case statement, the friend who sued the husband said, yeah, that he borrowed money from me to repair his house. He didn't pay me back. It's a few $100,000. He should pay me back. The husband's case statement came to me and said, I didn't pay him back because he's having an affair with my wife.
Fair enough.
Got complicated.
As it usually
happens. Yeah, but this fact or this supposed fact was completely omitted in the friend's statement, right? So I had my pre-mediation and I said, look, I asked the lawyer, you've seen what the other side is saying. I'm sure it's going to come up during the mediation. What is happening? What did your client tell you? Because you have completely omitted it. Right? So there are times when you know, and of course the example is fairly extreme, but you can imagine even in a lot of these commercial disputes that we are dealing with, because you have received both sides case statements, there will be certain things which one side says which the other side completely doesn't address. And I'll tell them, look, it's better I find out now at the pre-mediation so that we can prepare than I find out later. And oftentimes in this case, let's use the same example, right? The friend's lawyer, basically, the creditor, the one who loaned the money, essentially said, no, this is all a hallucination. It's just a bad excuse to not repay me. And I basically told the lawyer, look, it is well and good that you deny it, or your client denies it, and I'm as a mediator, I'm not going to ask too many questions, right? I'm just going to say I will give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but it's going to come up, and if it might help the husband be open to settling with your client, if you can if the client is prepared to explain this whole misunderstanding that has led to the husband believing that that he's having an affair. Is there anything you can bring to address the belief that your client is having an affair with the other side's wife? Right? So oftentimes it's like that. This is what I use the I won't ask them to prove it, but I'll tell them, look, you don't need to prove it to me, but right now, but I'll tell you this is something which has come up. Your client seems to have not told you anything about it. That's why it's not in your case statement. I think it's useful that you come for the mediation ready to address it, because that seems to be the biggest sticking point. Because I mean, and I'll tell you why. For this case, the husband actually already repaid half the loan. So he has the money. It's just out of sheer pride that he didn't want to repay it. Right? And oftentimes this is what it is. So I do use it to ask certain questions, just to help the lawyers prepare for the mediation. I don't use it to embarrass the lawyer. I more often frame it as, look, I want to help your client settle it. This seems to be where the block is. How can we come best prepared to overcome this block? But the point is, we don't just read and sit back and watch and wait for the fireworks to start. We wait and sit back and think, how do we help the parties prepare better and improve the chances of a settlement on the actual day? Too late to inject this into competition scenarios, which is partly why I don't, like I was telling the host, I don't often do competitions, because there is a limit to how true to life we can make the competition scenarios. Okay. Give me a minute. Sorry, I just pressed something which I shouldn't have pressed. Sorry, I need to redo this. Okay. Okay, so coming back to this slide, and I'm watchful of time. The rest of the process, I think it's familiar to all of you, right? Mediator does his opening statement. We invite the parties to talk. More often than not, when it comes to the proposal of solutions, they would differ, and then we have to break up into private sessions. And there'll be multiple rounds of private sessions before we actually land on something, and then we can put it all into writing and get people to sign off. This part's very, very straightforward. From the lawyer's perspective, when we are preparing clients, and I would say I sometimes play this role as a mediator as well, because I have enough rapport with the lawyers and all, and they don't know how to organize the mediation. But some of the important things to think about is it right for mediation? Is the timing right? Are the parties ready to actually sit down and talk? And why? Let's be clear-headed. When we work with clients, this is why we're asking you to mediate at this juncture. Having decided why we're choosing this time to mediate, then the question is who to mediate, because not all mediators are equal, right? Not everyone mediates the way that Aloysius does. Not everyone mediates the way that a Pakistani judge might mediate. How the Chinese mediate is very different, and I want to have some time to share some of this. What do we hope to achieve? What is our measures of success? Right? What are your long and short-term goals when you come for this mediation? some people come for mediation knowing that you cannot get a settlement, but it's still good to start the ball rolling in terms of let's just talk, right? If you're representing companies, who is going to come to represent the company? Are we choosing the one who can make a decision? Are we choosing the one who has the most background information? Have a clear purpose as to why we chose these people to come. And then if there are multiple people present on behalf of your client, how do we plan their involvement? Who says what when? Right? If you are dealing with a family dispute, there is a good chance, or a medical dispute, which I often do, there is a good chance that your client feels traumatized and afraid of sitting in the same room as the other party. How do we make sure that the parties feel psychologically safe? And this applies for a mediator as well. I'm one of the questions that I asked at the pre-mediation is your client ready to sit in the same room as the other side? Right? Because some of the corporate disputes that I do actually involve family businesses, and mediating for family businesses is one of the ugliest things, right? They really hate each other to bits. And they say, no, I cannot trust myself to exercise the right restraint when I see his face across the table. I say, then maybe we don't start with a joint session. Yeah. I can spend a whole day talking about this slide, but suffice to say that I think at the international level, practice has evolved a lot. If you have been doing some research, you will not be familiar with the evaluative, facilitative, and transformative jargon. Evaluative is where mediators actually quite actively provide their opinions on what is right or wrong, very often done by retired judges who become mediators. Facilitative is often the what is taught in schools, right? And they are a reaction to evaluative mediators. What is taught in schools is that mediators are not supposed to provide solutions. You're just here to assist in communication, assist parties in brainstorming and finding solutions on their own. Again, not a bad model. Transformative is where mediation is merged with a lot of counseling, right? There is this belief that, you know, we don't solve the problem for parties. We actually teach them to solve the problems, and that's why there's a therapeutic element. There's a self-improvement element to mediation. What is true, however, and the person who created this grid, Professor Leonard Riskin himself admits that actually this divide is very artificial. This divide of evaluative mediators, facilitative, transformative mediators is very, very artificial. He regrets creating this divide which he did for academic purposes. The truth is, if you are going to be a commercial mediator, a professional mediator, all these elements are part of your practice. At the right time, we're offering proposals and solutions. We are evaluating. At the right time as well, we actually sit back and ask the parties, talk and think for yourself what is good. We are facilitative. And we are very often cheerleading. We are very often transformative. We are very often helping the parties to suddenly discover strength in themselves to say, fine, let's close this and move on. How to balance these three dimensions is part of our skill. It is why I say, actually, in international mediations, we need to be a lot more purposeful. And if you look at the two axes that I've drawn up there, what we need to do is we need to have enough understanding of the mediation process and our role as mediators to be directive. We need to be directive and in control, very much in control of the mediation process. The parties might not know that we are puppeting them, but we are trying to help them to arrive at that mental space, that psychological space where they are comfortable to sign off, to trust each other. And for us to do that, we need to be close to them. We need to be proximate to them. Our skill is how we get into that zone where the parties feel like we are equally close to them. Right. And I know I had interns who come in and they are fascinated with how my face and my approach changes when I'm talking to a patient who has suffered grievous personal harm because of a medical negligence incident. And then yet when I talk to the insurer and the doctor, I look like I'm a different person, right? But that's because I need to be close to the patient and the family members. And then I also need to let the insurers and the doctors see and appreciate that I get what you're telling me as well. Okay, last 5 minutes. This is my analysis of and based on my interactions with my friends from Pakistan, right? My sense of what is going to work in Pakistan, commercially and professionally, is that for a lot of the clients in Pakistan, they judge a quality of the mediator by your absence of conflict of interest, how well you can show that, look, I'm truly equidistant. I don't know the parties. I have had no previous interactions. And the qualifications that you have as a mediator are going to matter a lot. So, that's why there's this competitions. If you show that you've won competitions, you show that you are trained at the right universities, accredited at the right bodies. I think this will go a long way to help you in building your credentials as a mediator. When you go into the mediation, your readiness to listen to the parties, your readiness to try to understand and respect the principles by which they run their businesses, by which they run their families, that is going to help you build a lot of trust with the parties, right? There are a lot of the Pakistani disputants that I've mediated for. They are very direct. They're very candid. They talk openly of their values. They're very upfront with their feelings. They would shout. They would cry. But push comes to shove, when we need to make a deal, a lot of the Pakistanis are prepared to make the concessions. For them to be the bigger man and to take a step back shows that I'm the better person, right? And then for them, a good mediation is when we can actually speak openly, and we can see that both sides are taking steps back to craft an outcome that is mutually beneficial. If I'm wrong about any of these caricatures or stereotypes, push back. Okay, push back. Let me tell you about how it is with Chinese disputants. And we've had a lot of them come to Singapore. I can tell you that Singapore is closer to Pakistani disputants, Pakistani clients. Mediating for Chinese disputants is tough. Number one, just to get yourself appointed is not easy, because they look at how close you are to them. They don't look at how non-aligned you are, right? So if you want to be appointed, they want to hear that you were recommended by someone they knew. Sorry, is there someone who has a question or a comment, or am I running out of time?
No, I think you can.
Okay, good. The process for them, they want to see that they want to hear the expressions of your respect for their principles. All right, and specifically their principles. They want affirmation that they are correct. We are going to be dealing with a lot of what they say and what they do don't seem to gel. They will come and they will say all the right things. I know it's mediation, I want harmony. I know we should not fight in court, we should not waste time and money. They know all the right things to say. But push comes to shove, for them to make concessions, that is a sign of weakness. And that is a sign of disrespect for their principles. So when the mediator asks them to make concessions, many of them tend to be, they view it as offensive if you push too often. And so what concessions they can make tends to be a very narrow range. They would have decided before coming for the mediation that this is where they are prepared to move. And it is hard for them to move more than that within the